So now we have Allen Ginsberg's Howl, and I think Amaris brought this fabulous edition, the City Lights edition. Isn't that great?
Yep.
I love that. Did you just
dear to my heart.
It's
No, I've had it for a while.
You've had it for a while, but it's pristine. You're supposed to write in it. Oh, you wrote a little bit in it. This is quite a poem, and given the conformities we've been dealing with recently, this is a real breakthrough in the mid-50s. So let's just look at some passages. Let's do the best we can with it. There's so much we could say and so much we won't get to say, but let's start right away with this fabulous, famous first line. I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked. Let me ask this question of you. How is it possible for the best minds of a generation, best brains, best intelligences of a generation, to pass through universities among the scholars of war, expelled from the academies for crazy? What's the disjuncture here? What's wrong? Emily?
The academy is supposed to be the sanctuary for the best minds of a generation.
And yet?
Here they're expelled, they're not welcome, they're destroyed.
So why do you think they're not welcome? Molly?
Because their ideas are too radical and they don't fit in the academic box.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Anna?
I think he's defining best minds of my generation differently than the academies would define best minds of the generation.
How? Just give us a starter on this. How is he defining?
Well, I mean, some people would define best minds of a generation as like a philosopher, scholar type, someone who, wants to sit in an office with leather-bound books and read all day and write papers, but this is a different kind of best mind. This is the creative best mind.
Why scholars of war? Anybody? Dave? Scholars of war? That's clearly not a happy phrase.
I think he's just referring to the old traditional power structure. I mean, these people, the teachers came out of World War II and they're all in reaction to that, and they taught.
They are in reaction, not the teachers, but the beats.
Right. The teachers are a product of World War II.
Right. Scholars of war, it's really quite a specific reference in a way, a generational reference. It's not simply that these are scholars who fought in World War II, but that the universities, as they became mega universities like the University of California, Berkeley we call it, or Cal, this became a kind of mega university where there were, in fact, scholars in new, let's say, political science, regional science related disciplines that were actually doing the work of the government in the Cold War. I think that's probably the reference here. And that to be affiliated with such a university for someone like Ginsberg, it felt as if there were ethical compromises involved. Okay, so expelled from the academies for crazy. Any final comment on this? Max? What's he seems to be declaring something passionately. It's very intellectual, this poem, but it's not happening in the universities. Let's just say one more thing about this. Expelled from the academies for crazy.
It seems like we're wondering what the crazy is. Like, what is? It seems almost like it should go with for academies for publishing crazy and obscene odes, but rather he just says crazy.
Crazy becomes a noun.
Goes back to that madness that has completely destroyed them. These best minds. It's just crazy.
So we'll have more to say about this madness, but clearly it's not acceptable to think this way, to be this way, to exist this way in a university. All right, so let's go to a second passage. This is a passage beginning with peyote solidities, and somebody want to say anything about that phrase, peyote solidities, the way it sounds? Allie, what's it sound like? Peyote, can you do a close reading of the sound? Peyote solidities? Yeah, that's the phrase.
I was just verbalizing.
Okay, peyote solidities. Say that 5 times.
That would be difficult.
Peyote solidities. What's it sound like?
I mean, it's not quite a tongue twister, but it definitely has a rhythm to it.
It's hard. I don't, no slight against you. None of us is really ready to talk about the sound of words as only the sound. We quickly go to semantics, and when and semantics is taken away from us, we don't quite know what to do. But let's just get into this, okay? Peyote solidities. It's a kind of metrical rhyme. The words sound alike in their syllabic structures. This whole section here, this mini stanza, is a sound poem. It's like babble flow, as Kerouac calls it. And I would like to play it for you, a little passage from one of Ginsberg's performances, and then we'll briefly talk about it.
Peyote solidities of walls, backyard green tree cemetery dawns, wine drunkenness over the rooftops, storefront burrows of tea-head, joyride neon blinking traffic light, sun and moon and tree vibrations in the roaring winter dusts of Brooklyn, ashcan rantings and kind king light of mind.
And I'll do the next, not as well as Ginsberg just did, but I'll do the next one. Who chained themselves to subways for the endless ride from Battery to Holy Bronx on Benzedrine until the noise of wheels and children brought them down shuddering, mouth-racked, and battered bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance in the drear light of zoo. Anybody want to pick anything and talk about the sound? Go ahead. Amaris, you first.
When I felt there was such a high concentration of consonants, I stopped really thinking about the semantic meaning, as you were saying.
Fantastic.
And it doesn't take away from the enjoyment at all. In fact, it enhances the enjoyment just to feel
nice.
the tension of those syllables. So you're brought along on that ride.
So the tight phrasing and the soundings make you conscious of sound and make you relax a little bit that you may not need to just do semantic sense making. Anna, so that was a kind of a general statement, but still good. Can you do a little close reading of some of the phrases?
Well, let's look
Close sound reading.
Sure. Let's look at battered, bleak of brain, all drained of brilliance.
There you go. What do you got there?
That's unbelievable. We have like these B's,
Battered, bleak, brain, brilliance.
And then battered and bleak sort of go together because there's the hard consonants in the middle there with the TT and then the K. And then brain, all drained. There's like amazing internal rhyme there. And then drained of brilliance in the drear light of zoo. I mean, it begs to be read in a very certain way.
I don't typically do this in this course, but I'm just like going to add a footnote here. It sounds almost exactly like it comes from the soundings of Gerard Manley Hopkins, who's a poet not read very often, but whose poem The Windhover uses the word bleak in the same kind of way, and I think also brilliance, I'm not sure. And Gerard Manley Hopkins is a poet of carefully wrought poetry. So this is going to challenge the cliche, the stereotype, somewhat reinforced by our decision to wear black and Max's to wear a beret today, somewhat unfortunately compromised by that silliness. It's in the style of beatnik as opposed to beat as in beatific or beat down, which is what Kerouac and others and Burroughs and others thought that beat should mean. Beatnik meaning a kind of satirized version of it, and the kind of tour of the Greenwich Village or of neighborhoods in San Francisco. So that cliche is the cliche of the typically semantic countercultural. We stand for something different. We live a different style. How does this passage that we just talked about contradict that stereotype of the beats, of the beat writers?
Well, if there is such, you're right, the language is, as nicely as it kind of flows off the tongue, it is wrought because, there are internal rhymes. There is a little bit of structure here, as much as it as much as it like on the surface kind of resists that structure, like it's there.
It's there. It is carefully wrought. It isn't just spontaneous in the sense of written and not thought about the way it sounds. And I'll just say by way of concluding this little close reading, that the next section, which talks about talking continuously 70 hours, battalion of platonic conversationalists, yakety-yakking, screaming, vomiting, whispering. It's as if first you have to move through, you have to be expelled from the academy, then you have to completely get rid of semanticism, or almost completely, and you have to just completely immerse yourself in the sound of words in this visionary romanticism, and then come out the other end and just talk. Just yakety-yak, just talk, just language coming out. And that's really what we're seeing here. All right, our next passage is simply a line, or two, depending on how you lineate it. Who studied Plotinus, Poe, St. John of the Cross, telepathy, and Bop Kabbalah because the cosmos instinctively vibrated at their feet in Kansas. I have two questions for you. One, what kind of curriculum is this? What kind of anthology is this? And two, how does the word because work? Is it really cause and effect? First, the slightly easier question. What kind of curriculum is this? Is this a curriculum you're going to get in a class at the University of Pennsylvania, Allie?
I wish. Actually, I think it's possible.
It's possible, certainly, because look at Amaris's shirt. I mean, a university that could offer a black T-shirt that's still established for 1745. That word "established" in context with the black. I mean, it's branded and everything. Anyway, this university must be okay. Anyway, Allie, go ahead.
I think it's certainly a mystical syllabus.
It's a mystical. Any mysticism
spiritual.
in there?
Well, Kabbalah.
Kabbalah, yeah. Bop is jazz, right?
St. John of the Cross.
St. John of the Cross, who is a saint who is into certain mysticism and also a poet. Yeah. So, Max, tell us about Bop Kabbalah real quick.
Well, bop is definitely a reference to bebop, which was the jazz of the time.
Characterized by
Lots of improvisation, atonality, sort of exploratory music making.
Right. Spontaneity within a certain basic constraint, kind of an outline.
Sure.
Yeah. And Bop Kabbalah itself as a phrase sounds
It sounds like bop.
Sounds like bop. Yeah, it's a pretty great phrase.
That's a wonderful
Okay,
phrase.
so this is the alternative. This is the non-academic. This is your reading list if you want to be a beat. Right? This is what you and he's saying these are the best minds of the generation who were expelled from the academies studied this stuff. Implicitly, you should do it too. Okay. So, what was my second question? Why? Because they studied these things because the cosmos instinctively vibrated. Any idea? It's a tough question. Is there cause and effect?
Maybe out of an intuitive sense of affinity to these poets who may not be affiliated with any institution.
Good, you're getting there. Just freewheel a little bit on this.
If the cosmos is vibrating at their feet, they're feeling something else. They're sensing something else in the world.
And where? Is it New York or San Francisco? Is it Columbia University?
Kansas.
It's Kansas. It's the middle of the country. You know, it's this is a kind of reference to their traveling university. You know, with someone on speed driving the car, jalopy, real fast across the country, and back again. And getting to Kansas and feeling the continentalism of America, really, that's kind of instructing them to try a different intellectual tradition. Go ahead, Allie.
Yeah, I think the fact that Kansas is specified kind of hints to, I mean, that's so specific. And it's interesting to kind of, if you were thinking about this in strictly traditional cause and effect, in a cause and effect way, then, you know, the fact that it's only because this vibration happened in Kansas that they adopted this kind of alternative syllabus, I think that kind of hints to or points towards kind of a multiplicity of causes.
That's really great. I've been reading this poem for a long time, and I never thought of that. Let me see if I can, in a friendly way, translate and maybe add to what you just said. If you read all these things, one of the things that's consistent in this curriculum is a kind of eschewing of cause and effect, a kind of non-rationalism that in fact creates this antic, comic, joking cause and effect thing about why is it that we read this? Because of this thing that doesn't make sense. All right, so let's talk about one more passage close to this one, and then we'll take a break and come back and finish, insofar as we can finish it at all, the first section of Howl. And this is this wonderful passage about the FBI who reappeared on the West Coast. I love that, reappeared. They've been driving, they put their feet in Kansas, they listen to the vibration, they read all this weird stuff, and then now fully re-educated and fresh, they reappear in San Francisco, and now they're investigating the FBI in beards and shorts with big pacifist eyes, sexy in their dark skin, passing out incomprehensible leaflets, burning cigarette holes in their arms, protesting their narcotic tobacco haze of capitalism, and distributing super communist pamphlets, super communist is capitalized, in Union Square, that's New York, I think, I don't know if there's a Union Square in San Francisco, I think this is New York, weeping and undressing while the sirens of Los Alamos wailed them down and wailed down Wall and the Staten Island Ferry, etc. Okay, so what's going on here? First, say anything about what's going on. Go ahead, Emily, and then Molly.
Well, I think one of my favorite parts of this poem was that these people are investigating the FBI. They're investigating the investigators. And
right.
it seems that what these people are doing here, these rejects are doing, is they're the ones who are asking the serious questions. And then maybe in order to ask those serious questions about what we're doing and how we're doing it, we have to be sort of looking in as outsiders. We have to be like rejects of some kind.
Good, nice. Molly?
Yeah, it's almost like a conspiracy theorist type of thing, where really
absolutely. Paranoia.
Yeah, asking the questions that most people would rather not ask, and they're trying to make a political statement, but it becomes a very sort of incomprehensible, multifaceted, general, dissatisfied political statement. Yeah,
I mean, this is a counterculture that isn't reproducing the I'm right, no, I'm right, left, right political discourse that they inherited from the 20s and 30s and 40s and was still going on in the 50s. This was a way of saying, standing completely aside from that, and then presenting as another side something that doesn't participate in the political discourse at all, that makes no sense, something that is incomprehensible, right? And what else is incomprehensible here? You have this, what else is incomprehensible? What else is worth saying about this? What kind of protest against the cigarette companies do we have? It's not we abstain from cigarettes. We're going to burn ourselves, right? America, you made me. I am you. If you want me to be addicted to Time Magazine, I'm addicted to Time Magazine. If you want me to smoke, I'll smoke all the way to messing around with my body. Yeah, and then you have the beards and shorts and the big pacifist sexy eyes sexy in the dark skin. You have the kind of shy and yet still exuberant celebration of various kinds of differences. You have implicitly a Jewish difference or a dark skin difference, and you have implicitly a gay difference. And that's also a way in which the FBI is going to be very, very confused. Final word on this, Los Alamos, Dave?
That's where they had the Manhattan Project, where they created the atomic bomb, which I think also refers back to scholars of war. I think physicists like Richard Feynman were scholars at Cal and helped create the bomb.
Interesting. So it's another way of protesting something that's obviously dominating culture in the 1950s, namely fears of nuclear annihilation. So you have this protest in Union Square. I mean, this may actually be I don't know this, I'm not a scholar, speaking of scholars of Ginsberg, but it may be that this is a reference to the 1955 protest, 10 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which surely involved Union Square as well as other places around the country, in which there was a kind of moment of silence. And so you have this weeping and undressing, this kind of countercultural move, this abashment, in the face of, so it would seem like non-parallel, weeping and undressing versus nuclear annihilation, but these people see a connection between them.